Hi, I'm the True Wise Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. So, GunGrave. It's a series that I really like. You see, I like to experiment from time to time, and I decided on the whim to play GunGrave, and I came out liking it. And there was also a sequel which made me a fan. There was also the anime, but we'll get into that in a bit. Heck, when I was actually playing the sequel, Overdose, the game's sequel was actually being announced, which was really cool for me at the time because it's a sequel to a game that most people don't even know about, and those who do know about it are more fans of the anime than the game. Cut to 4 years later, or at least 4 years, it's a little more complicated than that, I'll get into that when I get into that. Nothing. It basically disappeared on the internet. Until suddenly it got a release date and we all knew when it was going to come out. Which was really weird. But I got it on day one and it left me really disappointed. Not mad, well, not entirely mad, more disappointed if anything. Because all honesty here, it's not that bad, it just has a lot of flaws, but the flaws are so ingrained in it that they cannot be easily fixed, which we will get into in the review of GunGraveGore. So the game begins with Quartz, our new character. After being rescued from one of the villains of the game, she decides to join up with Mika's group, whose goal is to eradicate Seed, a sort of drug, sort of alien drug. It's a little complicated, I'll get into that when I get into that. And yeah, this game's sci-fi, by the way. You wouldn't tell by it, but it is. In any case, Mika does this because in the original game, her family was destroyed because of Seed, and thus wants to destroy it, with the help of Brandon Heat, or Gray. Which is weird how the game doesn't really elaborate or explain what happened in the past games. Well, it sort of does. By using the history tab, you can actually learn what happened in those games. I'm just saying it's not done more naturally in the game's story. Though that implies any of that game's history matters for this game. It doesn't. At all. Which, in all honesty, could have been a good thing to allow players to not be bogged down with exposition that might have not given even an accurate depiction of what happened. Because you see, here's the thing. For whatever reason, and I kinda get why they didn't, they decided in their recap to show off the anime. Why is that a problem? You see, the anime and the game cannot coexist in an easy way. Maybe if you say that only the past scenes in that anime works, that's fine because that's the only way I can actually see it works and emphasize the tragedy of that game. But anything else can't because, well, spoilers, Gray doesn't die at the end. Because that would be weird because Overdose is a thing who, to side note, I think the anime's still good, and that ending really fits with that show in particular, but not the game. Now you're thinking to yourself, why in the world does that even matter? I mean, it doesn't. It just kind of shows the problem with this game has, and I'm just really annoyed at. See, I thought, hey, are they gonna do anything with that history and have a great fun ROM? Nope. In fact, this game's plot is just bad. Just bad in that sense of why did they even bother with a plot when none of it really matters. And before we continue on, I want to counter a critique that this video might get, because someone's an idiot out there. And the critique is probably going to be like, ugh, why do you care about this plot so much? Well, I care because it's earnest. Basically, the first two games plots are a bit crazy, yeah, I won't lie. But it was always earnest, and it was willing to just tell a story. Thus, it invested me in that story. And honestly, why should it matter? If the game's going to waste time with cutscenes, then it should at least be decent and does its job to invest you in the gameplay and story to continue. Like, to give an example, Devil May Cry 3 plot is a plot that I really like, because all the scenes made you care about Dante and want to be as cool as Dante while still caring about his journey. So anyway, the plot, let me explain a bit. So basically they're against this group now called the Raven Clan that's distributing Seed. However, they are very non-existent and very boring to watch. They don't do anything. They are a very boring villain group. the most they ever do is nearly kill Grave, and anything else is so pointless. Because really, they're never really expanded upon or even given any reason. Like, for example, why does this sword guy want to kill Grave in particular? Because it's never explained. How does the Mistress of Death work exactly? Because they never really elaborate on. They say it's because of liquids, but that's not an explanation. What was the deal with taking that seed core outside of the Scumland? And no, they were expanding, they just bring this up like, oh, this is important for some reason. But don't elaborate why that seed core is that important. Who is this guy and how did they meet each other exactly? Why does Zell even care if the Raven clan is even using seed as a weapon? He was a part of a group that, did that anyway. Seriously, he just joins for no good reason. I worked with a group that made seed. Why does the game focus on Gunpo? Because his presence is so negligible that even that is not. In fact, who the heck is our main villain? Who knows who? Yes, that's our villain's name, by the way. Which, okay, I played so many games with villains' names that are kinda stupid, but no. No. This is where I draw the line. This is our bad guy. The guy we are trying to stop. And that is his name. Which, by the way, we don't learn anything about him at all. Hell, we don't even learn his deal. What he even wants. Which is really weird when you start thinking about that. Which somehow requires Mika for some reason, whose importance to the plot is so minor that if you replaced her with some other character, it really wouldn't change the plot that much. Because basically, she's just a plot device with no character to her in this game. Even though Mika does have a character. Which I will admit was a bit generic, but it was still a character. Also, one more thing, because this is something that really got on my nerves, because it's just said out of nowhere like it's important or something. You see, for some strange reason, Big Daddy is mentioned in the game. For some reason. Like, I legit don't know what the heck they were going on about, because it was implying that Big Daddy's DNA was keeping back seed? Which, no. He was just some normal guy. What the heck does he have to do with any of this? In fact, why was her seed infection reversed a bit in the game? Seriously, it's out of nowhere and makes no sense because they don't elaborate on it. Now, I'm about to say something that might accidentally poison the well of this discussion about GunGraveGore's writing, where I'm assuming, and I have to really state that, I can only make an assumption because there's really not a lot of information about this game. So the idea is that somewhere during development, the story pivoted, or at least something happened where the developers were like, we were changing how the game works a bit, thus how everything else had to change a bit, thus this line was left in before the story changes were more prominent. And that's my only guess of why this story is so bad, because the only other option is that the story they just didn't care about. Which is just sad because, they wasted their time and effort on a story that they could not give a crap about. Like, I get it, there are just simplistic stories, but those stories are just to set out the gameplay, which this doesn't at all, because there's more prominent focus on the story. Thus why my investment in it was more, there. And even then, I would still have to stress that how the heck did they think this was anywhere near good enough to work as such? Because this story is bad. It just feels lazy is all. And I mean, like, bringing back Bougie was already a bad idea because of his character in Overdose, which again, Overdose is a better sequel to GunGrave. I'm just saying that because it is the better game. Gave him a finality to his end. Because while it was a surprise, it was a satisfying end for him. Here, it's just a shrug and he's just back here. And that really does summarize the plot in a nutshell. It's just shrug and move on. Heck, was he even mind controlled during the whole thing? Because he at one point had one glowing eye and he doesn't do it ever again. But you would think that who knows who would want to keep him under control. But he doesn't for some reason. Okay, so after looking back at the footage again, I found out, yeah, he was mind controlled. And that's what's frustrating about this game in the nutshell. There's no character stuff, no fun tidbits about them. It's just things happening and the things they are doing. And honestly, I wouldn't have minded if the story wasn't that much of a focus if there were just interesting character moments. I'm just still surprised is all, because how did this get past anyone? The story just feels so incomplete to the point that I had to ask, what was even the point? Heck, even if the story was interesting, it would have been butchered by both the voice cast and just the bad animation. Because yeah, let's talk about the animation, and oh my god, it is just bad. Everything moves so weirdly, everything is just so lacking, that you think it was just made by one person, but no, it was made by a full team. The best way I can describe this game's look is that everything is made of plastic and are still trying to move, but still have those joint locks. You know what I mean? And I only mention that because all the CGI scenes are actually pretty damn good. The only thing I can say here that I have full on praise for. Well, except for weird Mika walk here, but actually, talking about the graphics for a moment, it's fine, I guess. They're trying to go for a stylized, realistic look, but it doesn't work all the time, and only Grave looks fine, and even then, he still looks ugh at times. And it's really not helped with how some of the animations work, how mouths work. Everyone talks as though they're being sock puppeted. It's really weird, and it really does not help with the voice just sounding terrible. Everyone, and I mean everyone except for one character, we'll get into that in a moment, sounds terrible. None of them can do the work they're needed to do. They just all sound terrible. It doesn't help with none of them actually having any sort of amount of voiceover work. And it's just, it just felt like they didn't even care about it. And really, the only one who had any decent work was Quartz, but by the end of the game, I just wanted her to shut up because she kept talking way too much with this dialogue that's just pointless because all it is great job, Grave! Watch out, Grave! It just got tiring. All honesty, I could keep going with the things that annoy me in this plot, but I'll stop right now and just talk about the gameplay. Which is the most salvageable thing out of this game because they basically brought it into the modern era, but for some strange reason forgot to bring the important lessons from those past games. In fact, I'd like to talk about those games for a moment. You see, all the games are about using your guns constantly, using your unlimited ammo. Why? Because reloading would take too long. Yeah, there's actually no explanation. Most likely they were doing what Devil May Cry was doing, saying that he doesn't reload for gameplay purposes, instead of actually giving a good in-universe reason, which they could have, but no, they don't. The goals of each level in the originals were simple. Kick their ass. That's how they all began, and really, that's the simplicity of the game. Kill every foe who gets in your way as you maneuver yourself into advantageous spots, since even though you got the power to stop everyone, your speed is not your forte. You are a hulking tank with a shield system that can absorb some of that damage, but not forever, as you will need to dodge and move about. However, your mobility options are again limited. But that's the real challenge, trying to make sure you can survive even against so many foes with these limitations. It's fun and it's never usually too taxing, well, except for the constant need to press the fire button, which, holy hell, that was a big problem. However, the designers did put in a system where you can change it to auto-fire, which is always good because no one's going to do that for a few hours. Which Gore expects you to. Well, at first, I'll elaborate on that. As I mentioned before, Gore did not have an auto-fire until an update happened. Which was... why? Because full auto wasn't even added until about 2 weeks after the game's release, which was the death nail of it. Plus a bunch of other minor things, but you know what I mean. Because let me tell you, pressing that fire button for over 15 hours, depending on how well you play, is not fun, because that's when it starts to actually fucking hurt. Plus also, this is where I need to talk about the length. As I mentioned before, this game can be around 15 hours if you're doing a little worse than most people. But in any case, shooting is the majority of the gameplay. You see, you either like that sort of challenge it gives you, or else there's really not much else to it. I mean, there is a little more to it, but it's the difference between a 6-inch puddle and a 9-inch puddle. The difference is there, but it's most people won't care about. Like, to give an example, see, as you are shooting, you're building up the beat gauge, which is under your shield and health bar. After you gain a full amount, you gain a demolition point that you can use for, well, a demolition shot, which has multiple purposes. The first one is that it's able to clear the floor against your foes. So you have room to breathe, but not only that, it's also there to refill your health so you can keep going and get a better rank, which we'll touch upon in a moment. Which is different than from the original, where basically you gain skulls depending on how well you did in the stage, and after attaining enough skulls, you would gain a demolition shot. Here the change is for the better-ish. It's a little hard to explain. You see, after each stage you gain a set amount of lab points, depending on your rank. You then spend those points on a few things you can spend on, like a new demolition shot or just a straight up stat upgrade. Which is weird, because you see, the stat upgrades are a bit baffling because you can't noticeably, unless you go out of your way to check it, notice that difference. And some of them aren't that useful. Like, yeah, health upgrade's nice and all, and helps you survive a little longer, but you're better off just putting it on your shield because you can regenerate it a little faster. Plus, there are some weird upgrades, like the coffin upgrades, where basically you can use the death hauler, the coffin, as a weapon to not only hit foes, but also hit missiles back. What, I said this game was a little weird and a bit crazy. Doesn't mean it can't tell a good story. However, using the coffin upgrade just basically gives you more attacks, but most of them are useless because you have guns. Shoot them! Well, I say that except for the shield foes, which are just the more annoying enemies in the game since they changed them from the original. You see, in the original, they took damage, they just took it at a lower amount. Thus, they still served as a foe worth noting since they can block attacks for stronger hitting units. Thus, there was a choice to be made during that time. Here, they are as advertised. They take no damage whatsoever. I say that because one time I used the slowdown ability to get behind one, and they really didn't take any damage. What the heck? This is where I need to mention the update again. You see, they actually fixed it so that demo shots can actually destroy shield, which was a good choice, because again, they were freaking annoying. Honestly, the updates for this game actually brought it from being to okay. It's really surprising that the updates did that to the game as a whole. Heck, they changed the train section from the game because everyone hated it because it was just a bad stage that you couldn't easily skip over by running past enemies. However, none of the updates really fixed the overall problem with the game. That being, it's too long. Which, yes, that can actually be a good critique. You see, as I mentioned before, this game is about 12 to 15 hours depending on how well you play. The other games were by far shorter, with the first one being around 2 hours if you know what you're doing, 6 for the Overdose game, which takes a little longer, but that's also because of the cutscenes and whatnot. And because, again, as I mentioned before, the gameplay is very simplistic and enjoyable. But that can only take you so far if you're forced to actually keep engaging with it. Because by the end of stage 15, I was like, I had my fill, I wanted it over. Because all honesty, the amount of stages that actually matter are about 15 as well. So most of these could have been actually removed and it would have actually made the game far better. I actually saw one of the critiques for this game being the linearity, which is just a buzz term now at this point because it's lost all meaning. It doesn't really help the discussion. In any case, the hallways are there to help emphasize the challenge of being forced to handle it, but still leaving options for you to how you want to handle it. The levels themselves are fine, just mostly forgettable. They try to make some more fights vertical, which was a decent idea for the most part. Not always executed well, but still. Strangely enough, the game has other characters which you can play as, which really came to a shock to me because oh wow, are they going to be like in an Overdose where they play a little differently and have different things about them? Not particularly. Bougie in the game is a little different. He's supposed to be like a glass cannon, where he's a little more powerful than Gray's base damage, but his defense is garbage, thus he needs to dodge more. Thus when he goes into burst shot, thus why he can dodge while still using it. Which can be interesting at times, but at some level he's a little better than Grave at times just because of the nature of this game in particular. Which is a bad idea because I'm pretty sure you don't want your main character to be outclassed by another side character. There is also Quartz, the new character, who if you're wondering, oh hey, I haven't mentioned that character. That's because she's so pointless that I have to ask the question, why did they make her? I mean, heck, did you know for a fun fact, she's the granddaughter to Wong, the guy from Overdose, and actually Gonpo used to work with that guy? Yeah, it's almost like this plot point could have been used to tell any sort of story and make us invested in her instead of the nothing. I'm sorry for going off topic, but that's kind of how I feel about her character as a whole. She does not work. She's a physical fighter in a game where range matters. Now, that's not to say that a physical fighter can't work in this type of game. They just need to be a balance around it. Because I played 10,000 Bullets, which is a good game, by the way. It can work if you put the effort into making them fit into that game. Which they did not at all. Basically, she just punches things and there's nothing else more to her than that. And even trying to learn her mechanic to dodge counter, which I really to this day still don't get, made her virtually unplayable. And basically she's only playable for one stage. Bougie for like 1.2 of a stage. Because if I had to guess, they were not planned at all. And yes, I do know that the game did update itself to add Bougie, but this is where I need to mention the upgrade system again. Because you see, you can play as him if you dump like a lot of points into him, which you can refund at any time, which is always nice, but at the same time, why do I need to do that? Because this game's upgrade system is so boring because it just takes so long to upgrade anything to anything you really want. Because the amount of points you get for each stage is so lackluster. And really, to bring this to my final point about the game that really got on my nerves, you see, this game costs around $50. I'm sorry, but this game doesn't even deserve that price point. For one, as I mentioned before the update, the game was barely playable due to no auto-fire, and the game's lack of a story just makes it seem like, why would you even pay that amount? All honesty here, if this game was priced reasonably, like $30 to $25, I would arguably say, yeah, it's fine. Because the higher the price, the higher my expectation of quality. That's it. At the end of the day, this game's just bad. Well, I say bad because the gameplay is fine, everything else around it is just bad. Then I just have to wonder what the heck was even the point. And really, I do want to mention this. The developers did go out of their way to actually update the game, which I do applaud them for. Most other developers would have just said, kill it, leave, do something else. But they decided to actually update the game, which is commendable at least. And they at least again made the game playable. But in the end, all I felt was I was having fun of the game in spite of it, not because of it. Next time, we're gonna do either Final Fantasy 13, oh god, or something else. I'm not sure.